They gave the dog a way out.
The door was open. The escape was right there. The dog did not move. It just lay down and accepted the pain. Why? Because something had already been broken inside it. Not its body, its belief. In 1967, a young psychologist named Martin Seligman ran a series of experiments that would change how scientists understand depression, failure, and the human will to keep going. What he found in his laboratory was not what he expected, and what it revealed about animals and about us is one of the most important and most forgotten findings in the history of psychology. This is the story of learned helplessness, what it is, how it forms, and why right now millions of people are living inside it without knowing it has a name. To understand what Seligman found, we need to go back to a laboratory, 1967, University of Pennsylvania. Seligman was a graduate student at the time, working in a department that was studying animal behavior. The researchers were running standard conditioning experiments, teaching dogs to associate a sound with a mild electric shock, the kind of experiment that had been done hundreds of times before. Nothing seemed unusual. But then something happened that nobody could explain. When the researchers moved the dogs into a new chamber, one where they could easily escape the shock by jumping over a low barrier, the dogs did something unexpected. They did not jump. They did not try to escape. They did not even look for a way out. They simply lay down. And they whimpered. And they endured the pain. The researchers were confused. Escape was easy. The barrier was low. Other dogs who had not been through the earlier phase, jumped over immediately, within seconds. But these dogs, the ones who had been exposed to shocks they could not escape, had stopped trying entirely. Seligman stared at those dogs, and he asked a question that would define his career. What if they did not try to escape because they had learned that escape was impossible? Not because it was impossible now, but because it had been impossible before. And that lesson had lodged itself so deeply inside them that even when the world changed, their behavior did not. He called it learned helplessness. Seligman, together with his colleague Stephen Mayer, designed a formal experiment to test this idea. They divided dogs into 3 groups. The first group received no shocks at all. They were simply placed in the harness and then released. Nothing happened to them. The second group received shocks, but they had a lever inside their compartment. If they pressed it, the shock stopped. They had control. They could act. Their actions had consequences. The third group received the same shocks as the second group, the same intensity, the same duration, the same discomfort. But their lever did nothing. No matter what they did, the shock continued. They had no control. Their actions had no consequences. Then came phase 2. All 3 groups of dogs were placed in a new chamber, a shuttle box, divided by a low barrier in the middle. On one side, an electric shock. On the other side, safety. And the barrier between them was easy enough that almost any dog could jump it. The dogs from Group 1, those who had experienced nothing, quickly learned to jump to safety. The dogs from Group 2, those who had learned that their actions could stop the shock, also jumped. They figured it out fast. But the dogs from Group 3, 2/3 of them, simply lay down. They made no attempt to escape. even when escape was inches away, even when the path to safety was clear. They had been taught, through repeated experience, that what they did not matter. And they had believed the lesson so completely that they carried it into a new situation where it was no longer true. Think about that for a moment. The world had changed. The escape was real. But inside the dog's nervous system, nothing had changed at all. So what is going on neurologically? What does helplessness actually do to the brain? When an organism repeatedly experiences a situation where its actions have no effect, the brain begins to update its model of the world. It is not weakness. It is not stupidity. It is actually the brain working exactly as it is designed to. The brain is an efficiency machine. It learns patterns, it stores lessons, and it uses those lessons to predict what will work in the future, so it does not waste energy trying things that have already failed. In a normal, changing environment, this is incredibly useful. You touch a hot stove once, you do not touch it again. Your brain has learned. But in a situation of repeated, inescapable harm, the brain learns the wrong lesson. It does not learn hot stoves are dangerous. It learns something far more devastating. It learns nothing I do matters. And once that belief is installed, it does not stay in one box. It spreads. The dogs did not just stop trying to escape shocks. Later research showed that helpless animals lost motivation across many areas. They were slower to eat, slower to explore, less curious, less active. The learned helplessness had generalized. It became not just a response to one situation, but a posture toward the world. Seligman recognized something alarming. These animals looked depressed. Seligman was not studying depression when he started, but he was looking at it now. He began to ask, if dogs could learn helplessness from uncontrollable experiences, could humans? The answer, documented across decades of subsequent research, was yes. Researchers ran human versions of similar experiments, not with electric shocks, with unsolvable puzzles, with loud noises that participants could not turn off, with tasks designed to guarantee failure regardless of effort. And the results mirrored what Seligman had seen in dogs. Participants who experienced repeated failure on tasks they could not control later performed worse on tasks they could have solved easily. They stopped trying sooner. They reported feeling more helpless, more passive, less motivated, and critically, they expected to fail before they had even begun. Now think about the world we actually live in. Think about a child who grows up being told their work is never good enough. Not sometimes, consistently, regardless of effort. At some point, that child stops raising their hand, not because they are not intelligent, not because they do not care, but because experience has taught them that trying changes nothing. Think about an employee whose ideas are repeatedly dismissed, not evaluated, not debated, just dismissed. At some point, they stop bringing ideas, not because the ideas run out, but because effort has been repeatedly disconnected from outcome. Think about a person who has tried to leave a painful situation again and again, and failed, and tried again, and failed again. At some point, they may stop trying entirely, even when the door is open, even when escape is possible. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is learned helplessness. a response that was rational once and became a prison. Here is the part of Seligman's work that most people never hear about. The popular version of learned helplessness ends with the suffering. It ends with the dog lying on the floor. But Seligman did not stop there. He asked a different question. If helplessness can be learned, can it be unlearned? The answer changed psychology forever. Seligman and his team went back to the dogs that had given up, the ones lying on the floor, the ones who would not jump, and they physically guided them, gently, lifting their legs, moving them over the barrier, again, and again, and again, showing them, through direct experience, that their movement could take them to safety. The first few times the dogs were passive, still not initiating, still not believing. But gradually, something shifted. After enough guided experiences of successful escape, the dogs began to do it themselves. They began to jump, to try, to act. The helplessness was not permanent. The lesson could be overwritten. But it could not be overwritten with words. It could not be overwritten with encouragement alone. It required experience, direct, physical, repeated experience of a new truth, that actions can matter. Seligman called this the key to recovery, not telling the helpless animal that things had changed, but giving it enough guided experiences of agency that the brain could update its model of the world. Decades later, this research became the foundation of something called cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most evidence-based psychological treatments in the world. The core insight is Seligman's. Depression, in many cases, is not just sadness. It is the cognitive residue of repeated experiences of helplessness. The belief, stored in the nervous system, that acting does not change outcomes. And the treatment, like the cure for the dogs, is not to tell someone to feel better. It is to systematically rebuild the connection between action and outcome. Small actions, achievable ones, where the result is real, where the person can see and feel that what they do changes something. This is why a small win matters so much to someone who has been losing for a long time. Not because the win is large, but because it rewrites the equation. It whispers to the nervous system, trying can work. And over time, with enough of those moments, the floor gets further away, the barrier gets lower, and the part of the brain that had quietly decided that effort was pointless begins to revise its conclusion. Martin Seligman went on to found the entire field of positive psychology, but his greatest contribution may be this earlier, darker work, the work that looked at suffering clearly and named it. Learned helplessness is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not a personality. It is a lesson, taught by experience, stored in the body, and believed completely, even when the world has already moved on. The dog on the floor was not broken. It was wrong. Wrong about what was possible. Wrong about whether the door could open. And what fixed it was not a speech, not a motivational quote, not someone standing over it saying, "You can do it." What fixed it was being walked through the door. Once, and then again, and then one more time, until the body remembered what the mind had forgotten. If you have ever felt that trying is pointless, If you have ever stopped reaching for something, not because you did not want it, but because experience had quietly convinced you that wanting it was useless. You may not be broken. You may just have learned the wrong lesson. And lessons can be unlearned.